When my parents cornered me at our family dinner and demanded I hand over my $850,000 digital marketing agency to my unemployed brother for the good of the family, I looked them straight in the eye, smiled calmly, and said 3 words that changed everything. Try and take it. The silence that followed was deafening, but what happened next proved that sometimes the quietest responses carry the most power. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah Michelle Chen, and at 29, I never imagined I'd be sitting across from my own parents, defending a business I built from absolutely nothing. 4 years ago, I was working out of my tiny studio apartment in South Austin, surviving on ramen noodles and pure determination. Today, Pixel Perfect Marketing Solutions employs 8 people, manages digital campaigns for some of Austin's biggest names, and generates close to $1 million in annual revenue. But success, I was about to learn, comes with complications I never saw coming. Growing up in the Chen household meant understanding your place in a very specific hierarchy. My father, Robert Chen, had built our family's electronics retail business from the ground up after immigrating from Taiwan with my grandfather in the 1980s. Chen Electronics started as a single repair shop in a strip mall and grew into 3 successful locations across Austin. My mother, Margaret, kept the books and managed the family, while my father focused on expansion and building relationships with suppliers. From the time I could hold a calculator, family dinners revolved around business discussions, revenue reports, inventory challenges, customer complaints, expansion plans. My older brother Danny and I grew up believing we'd naturally join the family business someday. The expectation wasn't just spoken, it was woven into every conversation about our futures. When Danny graduated high school, my father immediately brought him into the business, starting him in sales with plans to eventually hand over management responsibilities. I took a different path. While Danny learned the electronics trade, I discovered my passion for marketing during my sophomore year at the University of Texas. I'd started helping local restaurants manage their social media accounts just to earn spending money, but something about crafting the perfect post, building engaged communities, and watching small businesses transform their customer reach absolutely captivated me. By my junior year, I was managing digital campaigns for a dozen local businesses and earning more from my side hustle than most of my classmates made at their part-time jobs. My father never quite understood my fascination with what he called computer marketing. To him, real business meant physical products, inventory you could touch, customers who walked through your door and shook your hand. Digital marketing seemed intangible, unreliable, too dependent on technology trends that changed faster than he could follow. When I graduated with honors and a marketing degree, he assumed I'd put aside my computer hobby and join Danny at Chen Electronics. Instead, I took a position at Henderson Digital, one of Austin's larger marketing agencies. The corporate environment was supposed to teach me the industry from the inside, give me experience with major clients and sophisticated campaigns before I considered starting something on my own. What it actually taught me was that I absolutely hated working for other people. The bureaucracy, the credit-stealing managers, the way client relationships were controlled by executives who rarely understood the actual work being done. After 18 months of feeling like my creativity was being suffocated, I made a decision that shocked my entire family. I quit Henderson Digital and started Pixel Perfect Marketing Solutions from my apartment. My parents were horrified. Leaving a stable job with benefits to start an uncertain venture seemed like career suicide to them. My father made his disapproval crystal clear during increasingly tense family dinners, pointing out every risk and questioning every decision. When would I get health insurance? How could I compete with established agencies? What happened when the economy turned and businesses cut their marketing budgets first? My mother worried about more practical concerns. Was I eating enough? Could I afford my rent? Shouldn't I at least keep the corporate job while building the business on the side? Only Danny seemed supportive, though I realize now his encouragement had ulterior motives. He'd tell me how proud he was that I was taking risks and following my passion, how the family needed someone willing to think outside traditional business models. At the time, his support meant everything. Having at least one family member believe in my vision gave me strength during those terrifying early months when every day felt like a gamble with my entire future. The first year was brutal in ways I hadn't anticipated. Working from home meant no separation between personal and professional space. My dining table became my conference room, my bedroom doubled as a file storage area, and my social life completely disappeared under the demands of building something from nothing. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning to work on client campaigns before my first official meeting, then stay up until midnight responding to emails and planning the next day's priorities. But slowly, steadily, the business grew. My first major breakthrough came when I landed the digital marketing contract for Franklin Barbecue, one of Austin's most famous restaurants. Their previous marketing agency had been treating their social media like an afterthought, posting generic food photos and basic promotional content. I developed a storytelling approach that highlighted the craft behind their legendary brisket, the community that gathered around their picnic tables, and the passion that made Franklin a destination for barbecue lovers worldwide. Within 6 months, their social media engagement tripled, their weekend wait times grew even longer, and food bloggers from across the country were featuring Franklin in articles about Austin's culinary scene. More importantly for my business, other restaurant owners started calling. If I could make Franklin Barbecue even more popular, what could I do for their establishments? The second year brought music industry clients as Austin's South by Southwest Festival connected me with band managers, venue owners, and festival organizers who needed sophisticated digital campaigns to cut through the noise of an incredibly competitive market. My approach focused on authentic storytelling rather than generic promotional content, building genuine connections between artists and audiences instead of just pushing ticket sales. By year 3, Pixel Perfect had moved into a proper office in downtown Austin and hired our first full-time employees. I brought on Jessica Martinez, my best friend from college who'd just finished law school, to handle contracts and legal compliance. Kevin Park joined as my business partner, bringing technical expertise in digital advertising platforms that complemented my strategic and creative skills. We added a content creator, a graphic designer, and 2 account managers as our client. Roster expanded beyond restaurants and music venues to include tech startups, retail boutiques, and professional service firms. The business success felt incredible, but it came with unexpected personal costs. Romantic relationships suffered because I rarely had time for dates that didn't revolve around networking or client events. Friendships faded as friends got tired of canceled plans and conversations that always seemed to circle back to work challenges. Most painfully, my relationship with my family grew increasingly strained as my success highlighted growing problems with Danny's career trajectory. While I was building Pixel Perfect, Danny was struggling to find his place at Chen Electronics. He had natural charm and could connect with customers easily, but he lacked the detail orientation and work ethic that retail management required. Inventory often went miscounted under his supervision, customer complaints increased, and my father found himself constantly checking and redoing Danny's work. The tension between them was obvious during family dinners, though both tried to maintain a veneer of professional cooperation. When Danny earned his MBA from a decent program, my father hoped the additional education would translate into better business performance. Instead, Danny seemed to develop even less patience for the day-to-day operations of electronics retail. He'd talk about innovative strategies and modernization plans, but rarely followed through on implementation. After several major inventory mistakes that cost the business thousands of dollars, my father quietly moved Danny out of management and into a purely sales role. The demotion was devastating for Danny's ego, though he tried to frame it as a temporary setback while he explored other opportunities. He started interviewing with tech companies, convinced that his MBA and family business experience would make him attractive to startups looking for business development talent. When he landed a position with a promising software company, the whole family celebrated what seemed like a fresh start in a field better suited to his ambitions. The tech job lasted 8 months. According to Danny, the company culture was toxic, and his manager had unrealistic expectations. According to his former colleagues, whom I heard about through Austin's tight-knit business community, Danny had trouble meeting deadlines, clashed with teammates, and showed up late to important client meetings. When the company laid him off, Danny insisted it was about budget cuts and poor leadership, not his performance. That's when the family dynamics really started shifting in ways I didn't immediately recognize. My parents, especially my father, began paying much more attention to my business success. Conversations that had once focused on questioning my risky career choice now centered around admiration for my accomplishments. They started bragging to friends about their daughter, the successful entrepreneur, bringing up my revenue figures and client roster with obvious pride. But their increased interest came with subtle pressure for me to involve Danny in Pixel Perfect. Couldn't I use someone with his business education and family connections? Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a Chen family business that both children could contribute to? Digital marketing was clearly the future, and Danny just needed the right opportunity to apply his talents in a growing field. I resisted these suggestions as diplomatically as possible, explaining that Pixel Perfect's culture and client relationships had developed around specific expertise and working styles. Adding family members to a small team could complicate professional dynamics in ways that hurt both business performance and personal relationships. Besides, Danny had never shown particular interest in marketing, and jumping into digital strategy required a learning curve that could take months to navigate successfully. My parents seemed to accept these explanations, though I noticed they kept bringing up Danny's situation whenever we discussed my business achievements. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He was living with them temporarily while searching for the right career opportunity. The divorce from his college girlfriend had been expensive, and he needed time to rebuild his financial foundation. Surely successful siblings had obligations to help family members during difficult transitions. The warning signs were all there, but I was too focused on managing rapid business growth to pay proper attention to shifting family expectations. Pixel Perfect had just landed its biggest contract ever, a year-long campaign with a major music festival that would nearly double our annual revenue. We were hiring additional staff, expanding our office space, and exploring opportunities to work with clients beyond Austin. The business that had started in my apartment was becoming something truly substantial, with assets, intellectual property, and market position that represented genuine financial security. That's when everything changed. It started with family dinners that felt different from our usual conversations. My parents would ask detailed questions about Pixel Perfect's operations, wanting to understand client contracts, revenue streams, and business structure in ways they'd never cared about before. They'd bring up Danny's situation more frequently, emphasizing his business education and suggesting that my success created opportunities to help family members access the growing digital marketing industry. Then came the private conversations with my mother, usually during shopping trips or coffee dates when Danny and my father weren't around. She'd mention how proud they were of my accomplishments, but also how worried they felt about Danny's struggles to find his professional direction. Couldn't successful family members use their positions to create opportunities for siblings who were working hard to rebuild their careers? Wasn't family loyalty more important than rigid business policies? My father took a more direct approach, scheduling lunch meetings to discuss what he called family business strategy. He'd studied Pixel Perfect's growth trajectory and believed the company could benefit from additional management expertise, especially someone with MBA-level strategic thinking and family investment in long-term success. Danny had been following digital marketing trends, and was excited about the possibility of contributing to a business where his efforts would directly benefit family wealth building. The pressure was subtle but persistent, building over several months until I realized my parents weren't just making suggestions anymore. They were developing expectations about how my success should be shared with Danny, and my resistance was starting to generate real tension in our family relationships. The breaking point came during what should have been a celebration dinner. Pixel Perfect had just been featured in Austin Monthly magazine as one of the city's fastest-growing small businesses. The article highlighted our innovative approach to digital storytelling and included quotes from several high-profile clients praising our strategic thinking and execution. For the first time since starting the business, I felt like we'd achieved genuine recognition within Austin's competitive business community. My parents suggested celebrating with dinner at Moonshine Patio Bar and Grill, our family's traditional venue for important occasions. I arrived expecting congratulations and proud parents, maybe some questions about media attention and future business plans. Instead, I walked into what felt like an intervention. Danny was there, of course, but so was Mrs. Eleanor Foster, the accountant who'd managed Chen Electronics books for 20 years. She'd brought a folder full of documents that I quickly realized were research about business valuations, partnership structures, and family succession planning. My parents had clearly been planning this conversation for weeks, gathering professional advice and developing what they considered a reasonable proposal for my consideration. The basic premise was simple, according to my father. Pixel Perfect had grown beyond what any single person could manage effectively, and the magazine recognition proved the business was ready for expansion that required additional leadership capability. Danny had the educational background and family commitment necessary to help guide the company's next growth phase. Rather than hiring outside management, why not bring in family members who had personal investment in long-term success? More specifically, they wanted me to make Danny a full partner in Pixel Perfect, with equal decision-making authority and 50% ownership stake. Mrs. Foster had calculated that the business was worth approximately $850,000 based on revenue multiples and asset valuations. Danny could contribute his MBA expertise and business development skills, while I continued handling creative strategy and existing client relationships. Together, we could build something much larger than either of us could achieve individually. The proposal was presented as a family opportunity, a way to combine my marketing talents with Danny's business education for mutual benefit. But as they continued talking, the real expectations became clear. They weren't asking me to consider bringing Danny into the business as an employee or junior partner. They were telling me to share ownership of something I'd built entirely on, my own with someone who'd contributed nothing to its creation. The justification was family loyalty and shared success. I'd been fortunate to find my professional calling early, while Danny had struggled to find the right career fit. Successful family members had obligations to help siblings during difficult transitions, especially when doing so created opportunities for everyone to benefit from business growth. Besides, digital marketing was becoming too competitive for small agencies, and Pixel Perfect needed additional management strength to compete with larger firms. I listened to the entire presentation, asking clarifying questions and trying to understand the logic behind their expectations. Mrs. Foster showed me financial projections, suggesting how much faster the business could grow with additional leadership capacity. My parents emphasized how proud they'd be to have both children working together in a successful venture, continuing the family tradition of business ownership and collaboration. When they finished talking, they looked at me expectantly, waiting for my response to what they clearly considered a generous and reasonable proposal. Danny hadn't said much during the presentation, but he was nodding along with the major points and occasionally adding comments about his excitement to contribute to digital marketing innovation. That's when I asked the question that changed everything. What happens if I say no? The silence that followed was telling. My parents exchanged glances that suggested they hadn't seriously considered the possibility of rejection. This wasn't a negotiation in their minds. It was a family decision that I was expected to accept for the good of everyone involved. My father recovered first, explaining that saying no wouldn't make sense given the obvious benefits for everyone involved. Why would I want to limit the business's growth potential by refusing to accept help from qualified family members? Didn't I want Danny to have opportunities to rebuild his career and contribute to family success? My mother took a more emotional approach, expressing hurt that I would consider excluding my brother from participating in something that could benefit the entire family. They'd supported my risky decision to start the business, and now that it was successful, shouldn't that success be shared with people who'd always believed in my potential? Danny finally spoke up, saying he understood my reluctance to change a business structure that was working well, but emphasizing his genuine excitement about digital marketing and his commitment to learning whatever skills were necessary to contribute meaningfully. He wasn't asking for charity. He was proposing a partnership that would let him apply his education and business experience in a field where I'd already proven the potential for significant success. But underneath all the rational explanations and emotional appeals, the real message was becoming clear. My parents expected me to give Danny half of my business, and they weren't particularly interested in hearing arguments about why that might not be appropriate or fair. I told them I needed time to think about such a major decision, but their reaction made it obvious that delay wasn't what they wanted to hear. This was supposed to be a family celebration where I announced my willingness to share my success with Danny, not a business meeting where I needed time to consider their proposal. The drive home that night was one of the longest of my life. Everything I thought I understood about my family's support for my entrepreneurial journey was being reframed, in light of their expectations about sharing the results. Had they always assumed my success would eventually become family success? Were they proud of my accomplishments, or proud of what those accomplishments could provide for Danny? For the first time since starting Pixel Perfect, I found myself questioning not just business decisions, but fundamental assumptions about family loyalty, personal achievement, and what I owed the people who'd raised me. The business I'd built from nothing was about to become the center of a conflict that would test every relationship that mattered most to me. And I was about to discover that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who understand your worth the least. The morning after that disastrous family dinner, I woke up with a knot in my stomach that coffee couldn't dissolve. My apartment, usually my sanctuary from the outside world, felt different somehow. The framed photo of my family on the kitchen counter seemed to stare at me accusingly, as if I'd already committed some terrible betrayal by not immediately agreeing to their proposal. I moved it face down and tried to focus on preparing for what I knew would be a challenging day at the office. Kevin Park arrived at Pixel Perfect around the same time I did, carrying his usual oversized coffee and wearing the slightly rumpled button-down shirt that had become his signature look. As my business partner and closest confidant in the company, Kevin had an uncanny ability to read my moods, especially when something was weighing heavily on my mind. He took one look at my face and immediately knew something significant had happened. Over the years, Kevin and I had developed a working relationship that transcended typical business partnerships. We'd met during my second year of operations, when I desperately needed someone with technical expertise in digital advertising platforms. Kevin had just left a larger agency where he'd felt creatively stifled, and he was looking for an opportunity to build something meaningful rather than just execute campaigns developed by others. Our skills complemented each other perfectly. My strategic thinking and client relationship management paired with his technical innovation and analytical precision. More than that, Kevin understood the personal sacrifices that building a business required. He'd watched me work 18-hour days during our first major campaign launches, seen me stress-eat takeout at my desk while managing crisis communications for demanding clients, and celebrated with me when we landed contracts that seemed impossible just months earlier. He'd also been there during the difficult moments when family pressure about settling down and finding balance made me question whether entrepreneurial success was worth the personal costs. When I explained what had happened at the family dinner, Kevin's reaction was immediate and visceral. He set down his coffee with enough force to splash liquid onto his desk, and his usually calm demeanor shifted into something approaching anger. The idea that my parents would demand I hand over half the business we'd built together to someone who'd contributed nothing to its creation struck him as not just unreasonable, but fundamentally insulting to everything we'd accomplished. Kevin had met Danny several times at company events and family gatherings, and his assessment of my brother's work ethic had never been particularly charitable. During a holiday party the previous year, Danny had spent most of the evening trying to impress our employees with stories about his MBA program and his strategic insights about digital marketing trends. The problem was that most of his insights were either outdated or completely wrong, and our team had exchanged meaningful glances when Danny suggested that Pixel Perfect could benefit from more sophisticated business thinking. But Kevin's concerns went beyond personal opinions about Danny's qualifications. As my business partner, he had a legal stake in Pixel Perfect's future, and any major ownership changes would directly impact his investment and decision-making authority. The partnership agreement we'd signed when he joined the company included protections against unilateral ownership transfers, but family pressure could create complications that neither of us had anticipated when we'd drafted those documents. Jessica Martinez arrived shortly after my conversation with Kevin, and she immediately sensed the tension in our office space. As our legal counsel and my closest friend from college, Jessica occupied a unique position in both my professional and personal life. She'd been the one who'd helped me navigate the complex process of incorporating Pixel Perfect, establishing intellectual property protections, and creating partnership agreements that protected everyone's interests while allowing for business growth and adaptation. Jessica had also been present during countless late-night phone calls when family pressure about my career choices had left me questioning my decisions. She'd listened to me vent about my father's disapproval of digital marketing as a real career, my mother's concerns about my work-life balance, and my growing frustration with family expectations that seemed to assume my success should automatically benefit everyone around me. When I explained the latest family drama, Jessica's legal training immediately kicked into high gear. She started asking detailed questions about the conversation, wanting to understand exactly what my parents had proposed and whether their expectations had any basis in legal reality. Had they suggested that family members automatically had claims to business ownership? Did they understand that Pixel Perfect was a legally incorporated entity with existing partnership structures and intellectual property protections? More importantly, Jessica wanted to know whether my parents had been receiving advice from Mrs. Foster or other professionals about ways to pressure me into sharing ownership. The fact that they'd brought business valuations and partnership documents to what was supposed to be a celebration dinner suggested a level of planning and preparation that went beyond casual family suggestions. As we discussed the situation, I realized that my family's proposal wasn't just about giving Danny an opportunity to contribute to the business. They were essentially asking me to transfer hundreds of thousands of dollars in value to someone who'd done nothing to earn it, based solely on family relationships and their belief that successful siblings should share their achievements with struggling family members. The more I thought about it, the more I understood that this wasn't really about Danny's career development or family collaboration. It was about my parents' discomfort with the fact that their daughter had achieved financial success that exceeded their son's accomplishments. In their traditional worldview, sons were supposed to be the primary income earners and business leaders, while daughters were expected to support and complement male achievement rather than overshadow it. Jessica pointed out something I hadn't fully considered during the previous night's emotional processing. My parents' expectations weren't just unreasonable from a business perspective, they were potentially dangerous from a legal standpoint. If I agreed to make Danny a 50% owner without proper buy-in or contribution, I could be creating tax liabilities, partnership disputes, and operational conflicts that could destroy everything Kevin and I had built together. But the legal implications were only part of the challenge. The real issue was family relationships and the emotional manipulation that was already beginning to escalate. Jessica had seen this pattern before in her legal practice, where successful individuals faced pressure from family members who believed that financial achievement created obligations to share wealth and opportunities regardless of merit or contribution. Over the next few days, the family pressure intensified in ways that were both subtle and relentless. My mother started calling more frequently, usually with updates about Danny's job search that were clearly designed to emphasize his continued unemployment and growing financial stress. She'd mention conversations with friends whose children had found ways to work together in family businesses, highlighting how wonderful it was when siblings could support each other's success. My father took a different approach, sending me articles about family business succession planning and the benefits of bringing relatives into growing companies. He'd forward these materials with brief notes about interesting perspectives or food for thought, but the underlying message was clear. Other families found ways to share business success among multiple generations, and my reluctance to include Danny was becoming increasingly difficult for him to understand or accept. The manipulation became more direct during phone calls that started with casual check-ins about business operations, but quickly shifted to questions about my decision-making process. Had I given serious consideration to their proposal? Was I discussing the opportunity with advisors who might help me understand the potential benefits? When could we schedule another family meeting to continue the conversation? Danny himself began reaching out more frequently, though his approach was different from our parents' direct pressure. He'd text me articles about digital marketing trends, or send LinkedIn posts about successful brother-sister business partnerships. He'd suggest coffee meetings to discuss industry developments, conversations that inevitably evolved into discussions about his excitement to contribute to Pixel Perfect's continued growth. During one particularly uncomfortable lunch meeting, Danny explained that he'd been researching digital marketing strategies and had developed ideas about how Pixel Perfect could expand into new service areas and geographic markets. He'd mapped out a business development plan that could potentially triple our revenue within 2 years, assuming we had adequate management capacity to execute sophisticated growth strategies. The problem with Danny's ideas wasn't that they were necessarily wrong, but that they demonstrated fundamental misunderstandings about our client relationships, market position, and operational capabilities. He was thinking about Pixel Perfect as a traditional business school case study rather than understanding the nuanced, relationship-driven nature of digital marketing services. His expansion proposals would require massive investment, dramatic staff increases, and operational changes that could jeopardize the client loyalty and quality standards that had built our reputation. But pointing out these flaws would require me to essentially explain why Danny's MBA education hadn't prepared him for the realities of running a creative services business, a conversation that would inevitably hurt his feelings and provide more ammunition for family accusations that I was being unnecessarily resistant to reasonable suggestions. The stress of managing family pressure while trying to maintain normal business operations was beginning to affect my work performance and personal well-being. I found myself distracted during client meetings, second-guessing decisions that would normally be routine, and losing sleep as I replayed conversations with my parents and tried to anticipate their next moves. Kevin noticed the change in my energy and focus, and he started taking on additional responsibilities to protect our client relationships from my distraction. Jessica began researching legal precedents for family business disputes, preparing for scenarios where emotional manipulation might evolve into more serious threats or legal challenges. But the most painful aspect of the situation was the growing realization that my family's support for my entrepreneurial journey had always been conditional on their ability to control or benefit from the results. The pride they'd expressed about my achievements was starting to feel hollow, as if they'd been proud of what I could provide rather than what I had accomplished through my own efforts and determination. 3 weeks after the initial family dinner confrontation, my parents escalated their pressure to a level that made it clear they weren't going to accept my hesitation indefinitely. My mother called to inform me that they'd scheduled another family meeting for the following Sunday, this time at our house rather than a restaurant. Mrs. Foster would be there again, along with additional documentation about partnership structures and business transition planning. The message was unmistakable. This wasn't going to be another discussion about possibilities and potential benefits. They were expecting me to make a decision, and that decision needed to align with their expectations about family loyalty and shared success. As I hung up the phone, I realized that the comfortable assumption that family relationships were based on unconditional love and support was about to be tested in ways I'd never imagined. The business I'd built from nothing was becoming the battleground for a conflict that would force me to choose between family harmony and personal integrity. The story of how Pixel Perfect came to exist begins long before that first client meeting or business plan. It starts with a 10-year-old girl sitting in the back office of Chen Electronics, watching her father work late into the evening, surrounded by inventory spreadsheets and customer service logs that never seemed to get smaller no matter how many hours he dedicated to managing them. My earliest memories of business weren't glamorous or inspiring. They were filled with the mundane realities of retail operations, counting products, organizing shelves, answering phone calls from customers who were frustrated about warranty issues or delivery delays. But even as a child, I was fascinated by the puzzle of connecting products with people, understanding what customers really wanted versus what they said they needed. My father had built Chen Electronics through relentless attention to detail and customer service that went far beyond what most electronics retailers provided. He'd remember which customers had children starting college and needed laptop recommendations, which business owners were expanding their operations and might need upgraded phone systems, which elderly customers needed patient explanations about new technology features. But what struck me most was how hard he worked for results that seemed disproportionately small. Hours of inventory management, customer consultations, and supplier negotiations might generate profits that barely covered the overhead of running 3 retail locations. The business provided a comfortable middle-class lifestyle for our family, but it demanded every ounce of my father's energy and attention. I started to wonder if there were more efficient ways to reach customers, better methods for understanding their needs, and smarter approaches to building relationships that didn't require constant personal presence and individual attention. Even as a teenager, I was questioning whether traditional retail models were sustainable in a world where technology was creating new possibilities for connection and communication. High school brought my first real exposure to social media platforms that were just beginning to demonstrate their potential for business applications. While my classmates used Facebook and Instagram for social connection and entertainment, I was experimenting with ways that small businesses could use these platforms to reach customers more effectively than traditional advertising methods. I convinced the owner of a local pizza restaurant to let me manage their social media presence as a summer project. Instead of posting generic food photos and promotional announcements, I developed content that told stories about the family who'd operated the restaurant for 30 years, highlighted the relationships between regular customers and staff members, and created a sense of community around shared experiences rather than just food sales. Within 3 months, the restaurant's social media engagement increased dramatically. Their weekend reservations were consistently booked, and they were attracting customers from across Austin who'd heard about their authentic family atmosphere and community connections. More importantly, for my developing understanding of digital marketing, the increased business came without any additional investment in traditional advertising or promotional activities. The pizza restaurant's success convinced me that digital marketing represented something fundamentally different from traditional business promotion. Rather than interrupting potential customers with sales messages, effective digital marketing created genuine value and authentic connections that made people want to engage with businesses because those relationships enhanced their lives in meaningful ways. When I started at the University of Texas, I was officially majoring in marketing, but my real education was happening through the growing number of small businesses that hired me to manage their digital presence. Coffee shops, clothing boutiques, music venues, fitness studios. Each client taught me something new about the relationship between authentic storytelling and business success. The breakthrough moment came during my junior year when I started working with Red River Music Hall, a small venue that was struggling to compete with larger entertainment companies for both artists and audiences. Their traditional marketing approach focused on announcing upcoming shows and ticket sales, but their social media presence felt generic and interchangeable with dozens of other music venues across the city. I proposed a completely different strategy that positioned Red River as a community hub for emerging artists and music lovers who valued intimate experiences over large-scale entertainment. Instead of just promoting ticket sales, we created content that highlighted the stories behind the musicians, the connections between artists and audience members, and the unique atmosphere that only small venues could provide. We featured interviews with artists about their creative processes, behind-the-scenes content about sound engineers and lighting technicians who made live music possible, and stories from audience members about memorable concert experiences that had happened at Red River. The social media presence became a celebration of live music culture rather than just a promotional tool for upcoming events. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Red River's social media followers increased by 400% within 6 months. But more importantly, their audience engagement translated into consistently sold-out shows and a waiting list of artists who wanted to perform at the venue. They became known throughout Austin's music community as a place where emerging artists could connect with dedicated fans who genuinely cared about supporting live music. The Red River success led to referrals from other music industry clients. And by my senior year, I was managing digital campaigns for several of Austin's most respected venues and music festivals. The work was demanding but exhilarating, requiring creative thinking, strategic planning, and relationship management skills that I'd never developed in traditional academic settings. But the most valuable lesson I learned during college wasn't about marketing techniques or digital platform management. It was about the difference between working for other people's visions and building something that reflected my own values and creative instincts. During my final semester, I was managing campaigns for 8 different clients while completing my degree requirements and maintaining the grades necessary to graduate with honors. The workload was intense, but I loved the variety and challenge of developing strategies for businesses with completely different needs and target audiences. That's when Henderson Digital offered me a position that seemed like the perfect next step. They managed campaigns for major clients throughout Texas, had sophisticated technology platforms and analytical capabilities, and promised opportunities for rapid career advancement for candidates who demonstrated exceptional performance. The salary was significantly higher than what I was earning through my freelance client work, and the benefits package included health insurance, retirement contributions, and professional development opportunities that would be impossible for me to access as an independent contractor. My parents were thrilled that I'd found a stable corporate position that seemed to validate their concerns about the risks of entrepreneurial independence. But from my first week at Henderson Digital, I realized that corporate agency work involved compromises and limitations that I'd never experienced as an independent freelancer. Client relationships were controlled by account directors who often had minimal understanding of digital marketing strategy. Creative decisions were made by committees that prioritized safe, conventional approaches over innovative solutions that might generate better results but carried higher risks of client dissatisfaction. Most frustratingly, the work I'd found most rewarding, developing authentic connections between businesses and their communities, was considered secondary to generating measurable metrics that could be presented in quarterly performance reports. Success was defined by click-through rates, conversion percentages, and cost per acquisition figures rather than the deeper relationships and community building that had made my college client work so satisfying. After 18 months of increasing frustration with corporate limitations and bureaucratic inefficiency, I made the decision that would define the rest of my professional life. I gave my notice at Henderson Digital and announced my intention to start Pixel Perfect Marketing Solutions. The reaction from my family was immediate and overwhelmingly negative. My father couldn't understand why I would leave a secure position with a reputable company to start an uncertain venture that might fail within the first year. My mother worried about practical concerns like health insurance and retirement savings. Both of them seemed to view my decision as evidence of poor judgment and unrealistic expectations about business ownership. Danny was the only family member who expressed support for my entrepreneurial ambitions, though I now understand that his encouragement was motivated by his own career dissatisfaction rather than genuine belief in my potential for success. He'd tell me how impressed he was by my willingness to take risks and follow my passion, how the family needed someone who was willing to think creatively about business opportunities. At the time, his support meant everything to me. Having at least one family member who believed in my vision gave me confidence during those terrifying early months when every day felt like a gamble with my entire future. The first year of Pixel Perfect was simultaneously the most challenging and most rewarding period of my professional life. Working from my apartment meant no separation between personal and professional space, no colleagues to share the stress and uncertainty, and no guaranteed income to cover basic living expenses. But it also meant complete creative freedom to develop client strategies that reflected my values and instincts rather than corporate policies and committee decisions. Every client relationship was a direct reflection of my work quality and professional reputation. Every successful campaign was evidence that my approach to digital marketing could generate results that exceeded traditional advertising methods. The early clients were small businesses that couldn't afford large agency fees, but were willing to work with an independent contractor who was passionate about their success. A family-owned restaurant that needed help competing with chain establishments. A local clothing boutique that wanted to reach customers beyond their immediate neighborhood. A fitness studio that was struggling to communicate the benefits of their specialized training programs. Each client taught me something new about the relationship between authentic storytelling and business growth. More importantly, each success proved that the entrepreneurial path I'd chosen was not only viable, but potentially more rewarding than the corporate career my family had expected me to pursue. By the end of my first year, Pixel Perfect had generated enough revenue to cover my living expenses and invest in better technology and professional development. By the end of the second year, I was earning more than I'd made at Henderson Digital, while working with clients who valued my strategic thinking and creative innovation. The business success felt incredible, but it came with personal costs that I hadn't fully anticipated. Romantic relationships suffered because I rarely had time for dates that didn't somehow relate to networking or client development. Friendships faded as friends grew tired of canceled plans and conversations that always seemed to circle back to work challenges. Most painfully, my relationship with my family became increasingly complicated as my success highlighted the growing problems with Danny's career trajectory. While I was building Pixel Perfect into a thriving business, Danny was struggling to find his place in the professional world, and the contrast was becoming impossible for any of us to ignore. The second year of Pixel Perfect's existence taught me lessons about sacrifice that no business school curriculum could have prepared me for. Success in entrepreneurship, I discovered, required not just giving up certain luxuries or conveniences, but fundamentally restructuring your entire life around the demands of building something from nothing. My daily routine became a carefully choreographed dance between client needs, business development, and the countless administrative tasks that kept a small agency functioning. I'd wake up at 5:30 every morning, not because I was naturally an early riser, but because those quiet hours before the rest of Austin started their day were often the only time I could focus on strategic planning without interruption from client calls, employee questions, or the dozens of small crises that seemed to emerge whenever I tried to work on long-term business development. The apartment that had once been my peaceful retreat from the outside world transformed into a complex ecosystem of workspaces. My dining table became the conference room where I met with prospective clients who couldn't afford to pay for meetings at expensive restaurants or hotels. My bedroom doubled as a file storage area, with client contracts and campaign materials organized in carefully labeled boxes that lined the walls. My living room served as both office space and creative studio, where I'd spread out mood boards and campaign concepts across every available surface. The financial pressure during those early years was constant and unforgiving. Unlike employees who could count on regular paychecks regardless of their daily performance, my income fluctuated wildly based on client payment schedules, project completion timelines, and my ability to continuously attract new business while maintaining relationships with existing clients. There were months when delayed client payments meant choosing between paying rent and investing in the software subscriptions that kept our campaigns running effectively. There were weeks when I survived on generic cereal and peanut butter sandwiches, because every available dollar needed to go toward business expenses rather than grocery shopping. There were nights when I lay awake, calculating and recalculating cash flow projections, trying to figure out how to bridge the gap between current expenses and anticipated revenue. But the financial sacrifices were manageable compared to the social and emotional costs of total business immersion. Friends who'd been central to my life during college gradually drifted away as I consistently prioritized client emergencies over social plans, birthday parties, weekend trips, casual dinners that didn't serve some business development purpose. All of these normal life experiences became luxuries I couldn't afford to indulge. The isolation was particularly difficult during holidays and family gatherings, where conversations inevitably focused on work-life balance and the importance of making time for relationships and personal fulfillment. My relatives would express concern about my intense work schedule, suggesting that no business success was worth sacrificing my 20s to constant professional stress. But what they didn't understand was that building Pixel Perfect wasn't just about financial achievement or professional recognition. It was about proving to myself and everyone around me that the entrepreneurial path I'd chosen could generate results that justified the risks and sacrifices involved. Every client success, every positive testimonial, every referral to a new prospect was validation that my approach to digital marketing could create genuine value for small businesses that traditional advertising methods couldn't deliver. The Franklin barbecue breakthrough during my second year proved that Pixel Perfect's storytelling approach could generate results that exceeded conventional marketing wisdom. When I first met Aaron Franklin to discuss managing their digital presence, his restaurant was already famous among barbecue enthusiasts, but their social media felt generic and disconnected from the passion and craftsmanship that made their food special. Most marketing agencies would have focused on promotional content designed to drive immediate sales, photos of perfectly plated meals, special offers and discounts, announcements about catering services and private events. But I convinced Aaron to try a completely different strategy that highlighted the artistry and community culture surrounding authentic barbecue. Instead of just posting food photos, we created content that told stories about the 12-hour smoking process that started before dawn each morning, the relationships between pitmaster and customers who'd been coming to Franklin for years, and the dedication to craft that made each brisket a unique expression of culinary artistry rather than just another restaurant meal. We featured behind-the-scenes content about selecting wood, managing fire temperatures, and the intuitive understanding of meat and smoke that separated true pitmasters from ordinary cooks. We highlighted customer stories about special occasions that had been celebrated at Franklin, the community connections that formed around shared appreciation for exceptional barbecue, and the role that Franklin played in Austin's broader culinary identity. The social media presence became a celebration of barbecue culture rather than just a promotional tool for restaurant sales. Within 6 months, Franklin's social media engagement increased dramatically, but more importantly, their audience consisted of people who understood and valued the craftsmanship behind the food rather than casual customers looking for convenient lunch options. The Franklin success generated referrals throughout Austin's restaurant community, and by my third year, Pixel Perfect was managing digital campaigns for some of the city's most respected culinary establishments. Each client presented unique challenges and opportunities to develop storytelling approaches that connected authentic business values with audiences who shared those values. But restaurant marketing was just the beginning of what would become Pixel Perfect's signature approach to digital strategy. Austin's music scene provided opportunities to work with venues, festivals, and artists who needed sophisticated campaigns to cut through the noise of an incredibly competitive entertainment market. The challenge with music industry marketing was that most venues and artists relied on traditional promotional approaches that treated audiences as passive consumers of entertainment rather than active participants in cultural communities. Social media posts focused on ticket sales and event announcements, but rarely created the deeper connections between artists and audiences that generated lasting loyalty and genuine support for live music. I developed a content strategy that positioned live music venues as community hubs, where emerging artists could connect with dedicated fans who valued intimate musical experiences over large-scale entertainment spectacles. Instead of just promoting upcoming shows, we created content that celebrated the collaborative relationship between performers and audiences that made live music magical. We featured interviews with artists about their creative processes, behind-the-scenes content about sound engineers and lighting technicians who made live performances possible, and stories from audience members about concerts that had become meaningful personal memories. The social media presence became a celebration of live music culture rather than just a marketing tool for ticket sales. Red River Music Hall became our flagship music industry client, and their transformation from struggling small venue to Austin's most sought-after intimate performance space proved that authentic storytelling could generate business results that traditional advertising couldn't deliver. Within 18 months, Red River was consistently selling out shows, had a waiting list of artists who wanted to perform there, and had become a cultural institution that music lovers throughout Texas identified with quality and authenticity. The music industry success led to opportunities with South by Southwest and other major festivals that needed digital strategies capable of reaching national audiences while maintaining the authentic Austin identity that made these events special. Working with SXSW taught me how to scale storytelling approaches for much larger audiences without losing the personal connections and community focus that made smaller campaigns effective. By my 4th year, Pixel Perfect had evolved from a one-person freelance operation into a legitimate agency with a growing team of talented professionals who shared my commitment to authentic marketing and community building. Hiring Jessica Martinez as our legal counsel and business advisor provided expertise in contracts and compliance that allowed me to focus on creative strategy and client relationships rather than administrative details that had consumed increasing amounts of my time. Bringing Kevin Park on as my business partner represented the biggest risk and most important decision in Pixel Perfect's development. Kevin had left a secure position at a larger agency to join a much smaller operation with uncertain long-term prospects, but his technical expertise in digital advertising platforms complemented my strategic and creative skills in ways that made our combined capabilities much stronger than either of us could offer individually. The partnership with Kevin also provided emotional support and shared responsibility that made the intense demands of agency work more sustainable. Having someone who understood the pressures of client management, the stress of business development, and the satisfaction of creative problem-solving meant that I was no longer carrying the entire burden of Pixel Perfect's success or failure. But the business growth that felt so satisfying professionally was creating unexpected complications in my family relationships. As Pixel Perfect's revenue increased and our client roster expanded to include well-known Austin businesses, my parents' attitude toward my career choice shifted from skeptical concern to obvious pride mixed with growing expectations about how my success should benefit the broader family. Danny's career struggles during this same period created a contrast that became increasingly difficult for all of us to ignore. While I was building a thriving business that generated positive media attention and growing financial returns, Danny was experiencing a series of professional setbacks that highlighted his difficulty finding work that matched his educational credentials and personal ambitions. The family dinners that had once focused on my parents' concerns about my risky career choice now centered around celebrating Pixel Perfect's achievements, while carefully avoiding direct discussion of Danny's continued unemployment and growing financial dependence on our parents' support. The shift in family dynamics was subtle, but unmistakable. Conversations about my business success were always followed by mentions of Danny's job search, suggestions about how successful siblings could help family members during difficult transitions, and increasingly direct questions about whether Pixel Perfect's growth might create opportunities for additional family involvement. I was too focused on managing rapid business expansion to pay proper attention to the implications of these changing family expectations. Pixel Perfect had just landed our biggest contract ever, with a major music festival that would nearly double our annual revenue. We were hiring additional staff and expanding our office space, and we were exploring opportunities to work with clients beyond Austin's local market. The business that had started in my apartment was becoming something genuinely substantial, with assets, intellectual property, and market position that represented real financial security for everyone involved. But that success was about to become the catalyst for family conflicts that would test every relationship that mattered most to me. Danny had always been the golden child in our family, though I don't think any of us would have used that phrase to describe the dynamics we all understood but rarely discussed openly. As the older sibling and only son in a traditional Asian American household, Danny's achievements were celebrated with an enthusiasm that my own accomplishments never quite generated, even when my results objectively exceeded his performance. When Danny graduated high school with decent but unremarkable grades, my parents threw a celebration dinner that included extended family and family friends. When I graduated 2 years later with honors and a full scholarship to the University of Texas, the celebration was quieter, more focused on relief that I'd found a good educational opportunity rather than pride in exceptional achievement. The pattern continued through college and into our early careers. Danny's MBA graduation was marked with a large party where my father gave speeches about the bright future ahead for his son, the business leader who would carry forward the family's entrepreneurial legacy. When I graduated summa cum laude with a marketing degree, my parents expressed satisfaction that I'd completed my education successfully and would be able to find stable employment. But the favoritism wasn't malicious or deliberately hurtful. It was cultural and generational, rooted in assumptions about family roles and gender expectations that my parents had inherited from their own upbringing. Sons were expected to be the primary income earners and business leaders, while daughters were supposed to support and complement male achievement rather than pursue independent success that might overshadow their brother's accomplishments. Danny understood his privileged position in the family hierarchy, but he also felt the pressure that came with elevated expectations. My parents didn't just want him to succeed. They needed him to validate their belief that sons would naturally become the family's primary source of achievement and financial security. When Danny joined Chen Electronics immediately after college, the arrangement seemed to benefit everyone involved. My father gained a potential successor who could eventually take over business operations. Danny had immediate employment that utilized his education and family connections, and my parents could point to concrete evidence that their son was following a responsible career path that built on the family's entrepreneurial foundation. But retail electronics management required skills and temperament that didn't align with Danny's natural strengths or personal interests. Customer service demanded patience and attention to detail that Danny found tedious and unrewarding. Inventory management required systematic organization and follow-through that conflicted with his preference for high-level strategic thinking over day-to-day operational execution. More fundamentally, Danny's vision of business leadership involved innovation, expansion, and strategic decision-making, while the reality of managing Chen Electronics involved addressing customer complaints, managing supplier relationships, and solving the mundane problems that kept small retail operations functioning effectively. The tension between Danny's expectations and the reality of family business management became obvious during family dinners, where Danny would describe his ideas for modernizing Chen Electronics, while my father listened with increasing skepticism about proposals that seemed expensive, risky, and disconnected from their existing customer base and operational capabilities. Danny wanted to expand into online sales, develop partnerships with technology companies, and positioned Chen Electronics as a comprehensive technology solutions provider rather than a traditional electronics retailer. These weren't necessarily bad ideas, but they required capital investment, technical expertise, and market understanding that the family business wasn't equipped to support. My father had built Chen Electronics through conservative growth, personal customer relationships, and careful attention to cash flow and operational efficiency. Danny's expansion proposals threatened to disrupt a business model that had provided steady income for decades in pursuit of rapid growth that might succeed spectacularly or fail catastrophically. The conflict between father and son played out in increasingly tense conversations about business strategy, with Danny arguing that Chen Electronics needed to evolve with changing technology markets, while my father insisted that proven approaches were safer than experimental ventures that could jeopardize the family's financial security. As the tension escalated, my father began quietly reducing Danny's management responsibilities while maintaining the appearance of collaboration and shared decision-making. Important vendor negotiations were handled directly by my father rather than delegated to Danny. Financial decisions were made without Danny's input, even though he was supposedly being groomed for eventual business leadership. Danny's demotion from management to sales was presented as a temporary arrangement that would allow him to develop better understanding of customer relationships and frontline operations. But everyone involved understood that the change reflected my father's growing concerns about Danny's judgment and work ethic, rather than a genuine development opportunity. The psychological impact of the demotion was devastating for Danny's confidence and self-image. Being relegated to a sales role after years of expecting to inherit business leadership felt like public acknowledgement that he'd failed to meet his father's expectations and family obligations. Danny started exploring employment opportunities outside the family business, looking for positions where his MBA education and business development ideas would be valued rather than dismissed as impractical or risky. When he landed the position with a promising software company, the entire family celebrated what seemed like a fresh start in a field better suited to his ambitions and educational background. The technology sector seemed like a perfect fit for Danny's interests in innovation and strategic thinking. Software companies valued MBA credentials and business development expertise, and the rapid growth environment would provide opportunities for career advancement that weren't possible in traditional family retail operations. For 8 months, Danny thrived in the new environment. He was enthusiastic about the company's products, excited about the potential for rapid career growth, and confident that he'd finally found a professional setting where his talents could be properly utilized and rewarded. But the same patterns that had created problems at Chen Electronics began emerging in Danny's corporate position. Project deadlines that seemed reasonable during planning phases became overwhelming when implementation required sustained attention to detail and follow-through. Client relationships that started with enthusiastic presentations deteriorated when ongoing management demanded consistent communication and problem-solving capabilities. According to Danny's version of events, the software company's culture was toxic, and his manager had unrealistic expectations about performance and results. The workload was unmanageable, the team dynamics were dysfunctional, and the company's leadership lacked the strategic vision necessary to compete effectively in a rapidly changing technology market. But Austin's business community is small and interconnected, and alternative perspectives on Danny's performance began reaching me through professional networks and industry connections. Colleagues at the software company described missed deadlines, incomplete project deliverables, and conflicts with team members who felt that Danny wasn't carrying his share of collaborative responsibilities. The company's decision to terminate Danny's employment was presented as a budget reduction and organizational restructuring, but the timing and circumstances suggested that performance issues were the primary motivation for the decision. Danny's return to our parents' house was supposed to be a temporary arrangement while he searched for another position that better matched his qualifications and career goals. But weeks turned into months, and Danny's job search seemed to generate interviews, but no concrete offers from companies that could provide the salary and advancement opportunities he felt he deserved. During this period of unemployment and increasing dependence on our parents' financial support, family dynamics shifted in ways that created new pressures and expectations around my business success. Danny's career struggles highlighted the contrast. With Pixel Perfect's continued growth and growing recognition within Austin, the shift in my family's behavior was so gradual that I almost missed it entirely. Like the way you don't notice seasons changing until one day you realize the leaves have completely transformed, and you can't remember exactly when autumn began. What started as innocent questions about Pixel Perfect's operations slowly evolved into probing conversations that felt more like business intelligence gathering than family interest. My mother had always been curious about my work, but her questions had previously focused on my well-being and work-life balance rather than specific business details. She'd ask whether I was eating regularly, getting enough sleep, or making time for social activities outside of client obligations. Now, her inquiries centered around revenue figures, employee costs, and operational challenges that seemed oddly sophisticated for someone who'd never shown particular interest in digital marketing strategies. During our monthly shopping trips to South Park Meadows, conversations that used to focus on fashion trends and family gossip began incorporating detailed questions about Pixel Perfect's client acquisition process. How did I identify potential customers? What factors influenced pricing decisions? How long did typical client relationships last? And what percentage of revenue came from repeat business versus new account development? At first, I attributed her curiosity to natural maternal pride in my professional accomplishments. My mother had watched me struggle through the uncertain early years of entrepreneurship, and seeing Pixel Perfect evolve into a thriving business must have been validating. After years of worrying about my career choices and financial stability, but the questions became increasingly specific and business-focused in ways that seemed disconnected from normal parental interest. She wanted to understand the legal structure of my partnership with Kevin, the intellectual property protections we'd established around our proprietary marketing strategies, and the contractual obligations that bound our major clients to ongoing service relationships. My father's approach was more direct, but equally unusual. He'd always been interested in business operations, given his decades of experience managing Chen Electronics, but his previous conversations about Pixel Perfect had focused on offering advice about cash flow management, customer service best practices, and operational efficiency improvements. Now, he was asking detailed questions about business valuation methodologies, partnership structures, and succession planning strategies that seemed oddly sophisticated for casual family discussions. He'd mention articles he'd read about family, business transitions, successful brother-sister partnerships, and innovative approaches to bringing multiple generations into growing companies. These conversations often happened during our periodic lunch meetings at Radio Coffee, where my father would order his usual black coffee and start discussing what he called strategic business development opportunities. He'd explain how impressed he was with Pixel Perfect's growth trajectory, but suggest that sustained expansion would require additional management expertise and strategic thinking capabilities. According to his analysis, digital marketing was becoming increasingly competitive, and small agencies needed to evolve quickly or risk being overwhelmed by larger firms with superior resources and technological capabilities. Pixel Perfect's success had created opportunities for strategic partnerships or management expansion that could accelerate growth while protecting our market position against emerging threats. The conversations felt like consulting sessions rather than family discussions, complete with references to business school concepts and strategic frameworks that my father had never mentioned during previous years of entrepreneurial advice and guidance. He'd discuss market positioning, competitive advantages, and organizational development strategies with a level of sophistication that suggested considerable research and preparation. But the most unsettling aspect of these interactions wasn't their business focus or strategic sophistication. It was the way they consistently circled back to Danny's situation and the potential for family collaboration in ways that could benefit everyone involved. My father would spend 20 minutes analyzing Pixel Perfect's competitive landscape and growth opportunities, then seamlessly transition into updates about Danny's job search and his growing interest in digital marketing trends. Had I noticed how much Danny had been studying social media strategies and campaign development techniques? Did I realize that his MBA education included coursework in brand management and market analysis that could complement my creative and operational expertise? My mother's approach was more emotional, but equally persistent. During coffee dates at Joe's on South Lamar, she'd express pride in my professional accomplishments while simultaneously conveying concern about Danny's continued unemployment and growing financial dependence on their support. She'd describe conversations with friends whose children had found ways to work together in family businesses, emphasizing how wonderful it was when siblings could support each other's success rather than pursuing separate career paths that created unnecessary competition and family tension. The guilt was subtle but unmistakable. Successful family members had obligations to help relatives during difficult transitions, especially when doing so created opportunities for mutual benefit rather than one-sided charity. Wasn't family collaboration more rewarding than individual achievement that left other family members struggling with career challenges and financial insecurity? These conversations always concluded with suggestions that I consider how Pixel Perfect's continued growth might create opportunities for family involvement that would benefit everyone while strengthening the business through additional management, expertise, and strategic thinking capabilities. The pressure was building slowly but consistently, like water gradually filling a container that you don't notice until the level starts approaching the rim. Every family interaction included references to business development opportunities, strategic partnerships, and the benefits of bringing qualified family members into growing companies. Danny's direct outreach began around the same time my parents started their coordinated campaign of subtle manipulation and strategic suggestions. He'd text me articles about digital marketing trends, send LinkedIn posts about successful family business partnerships, and suggest coffee meetings to discuss industry developments that invariably evolved into conversations about his excitement to contribute to Pixel Perfect's continued expansion. His approach was more sophisticated than I'd expected, demonstrating genuine research into digital marketing strategies and thoughtful analysis of current industry trends. He'd identified potential service areas where Pixel Perfect could expand, our offerings, geographic markets that seemed underserved by existing agencies, and technological tools that could improve our operational efficiency and client results. During a particularly memorable lunch meeting at Moonshine Patio Bar, Danny presented what amounted to a comprehensive business development proposal for Pixel Perfect's next growth phase. He'd researched our competitors' service offerings, analyzed pricing strategies across the Austin market, and developed recommendations for expansion opportunities that could potentially double our revenue within 18 months. The presentation was impressive in its scope and analytical rigor, but it revealed fundamental misunderstandings about our client relationships, operational capabilities, and market positioning that made his recommendations largely impractical. Despite their theoretical sophistication, Danny was thinking about Pixel Perfect as a traditional business school case study, focusing on revenue maximization and market share expansion, without understanding the relationship-driven nature of digital marketing services or the quality standards that had built our reputation within Austin's competitive creative industry. His expansion proposals would require massive capital investment, dramatic staff increases, and operational changes that could jeopardize the client loyalty and authentic brand identity that differentiated Pixel Perfect from larger agencies with superior resources but less personal attention and creative innovation. But pointing out these flaws would require me to essentially explain why Danny's MBA education hadn't prepared him for the realities of running a creative services business, a conversation that would inevitably hurt his feelings and provide additional ammunition for family accusations that I was being unnecessarily resistant to reasonable collaboration opportunities. The most troubling aspect of Danny's business development research was how much detailed information he'd gathered about Pixel Perfect's operations, client relationships, and financial performance. Some of this information was publicly available through our website, social media presence, and industry recognition, but other details suggested that he'd been discussing my business with our parents in ways that went far beyond casual family updates. He knew specifics about our contract terms with major clients, understood the profit margins on different service offerings, and had insights into our operational challenges and growth constraints that I'd never shared with him directly. The level of detailed knowledge suggested coordinated information gathering rather than independent research. During these coffee meetings, Danny would emphasize his genuine excitement about digital marketing and his commitment to learning whatever skills were necessary to contribute meaningfully to Pixel Perfect's success. He wasn't asking for charity or expecting immediate leadership responsibilities, just opportunities to apply his business education and strategic thinking capabilities in a field where I'd already proven the potential for significant success. But underneath his enthusiasm and strategic analysis, I could sense desperation about his continued unemployment and growing financial dependence on our parents' support. The confidence and optimism that had characterized Danny throughout our childhood was being eroded by repeated professional setbacks and the humiliation of moving back into his childhood bedroom at age 32. The family pressure was beginning to affect my work performance and personal well-being in ways that Kevin and Jessica noticed before I fully acknowledged the problem myself. I found myself distracted during client meetings, second-guessing decisions that would normally be routine, and losing sleep as I replayed conversations with my parents and tried to anticipate their next moves in what was beginning to feel like a coordinated campaign rather than individual expressions of concern and support. Kevin noticed changes in my energy level and decision-making process during our weekly strategy meetings. I was spending more time than usual deliberating over routine operational decisions, questioning client recommendations that aligned with our proven methodologies, and expressing unusual anxiety about business development opportunities that would normally generate excitement and strategic enthusiasm. Jessica observed similar patterns during our monthly legal and compliance reviews. I was asking more questions about partnership protection clauses, intellectual property ownership rights, and business valuation methodologies that seemed disconnected from immediate operational needs or upcoming contract negotiations. When they finally confronted me about these changes, I realized that family pressure was creating stress and uncertainty that threatened to undermine the confidence and strategic focus that had built Pixel Perfect's success over 4 years of consistent growth and client satisfaction. The breaking point came during a family dinner that was supposed to celebrate Pixel Perfect's feature in Austin Monthly magazine as one of the city's fastest-growing small businesses. The article highlighted our innovative approach to digital storytelling and included quotes from several high-profile clients praising our strategic thinking and campaign execution. For the first time since starting the business, I felt like we'd achieved genuine recognition within Austin's competitive business community, validation that our approach to authentic marketing and community building could generate results that traditional advertising agencies couldn't deliver. But instead of the celebration I'd anticipated, the dinner felt like a carefully orchestrated intervention designed to pressure me into decisions that would fundamentally change Pixel Perfect's ownership structure and operational control. My parents had invited Mrs. Eleanor Foster, the accountant who'd managed Chen Electronics books for 20 years, and she'd brought a folder full of documents that I quickly realized represented months of research about business valuations, partnership structures, and family succession planning strategies. The entire evening had been planned as a formal presentation of their expectations about how my success should be shared with Danny, complete with financial analysis, legal frameworks, and implementation timelines that suggested professional consultation and strategic coordination rather than spontaneous family suggestions. As I listened to their proposal and realized the extent of planning and preparation behind their demands, I understood that this wasn't really about business development opportunities or family collaboration. It was about my parents' discomfort with their daughter achieving financial success that exceeded their son's accomplishments, and their determination to restore traditional family hierarchies through forced wealth redistribution, regardless of merit or contribution. The business I'd built from nothing was about to become the battleground for a conflict that would test every assumption I'd held about family loyalty, personal achievement, and what I owed the people who'd raised me. The morning after that tense family dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my relationship with my parents and Danny. The formal presentation they'd orchestrated, complete with Mrs. Foster's business valuation, documents, and detailed partnership proposals, felt less like family discussion and more like corporate negotiation, where I was expected to surrender control of something I'd built entirely through my own efforts and determination. But it wasn't until I arrived at Pixel Perfect's office and found Kevin already at his desk, looking unusually serious and uncomfortable, that I realized the situation was far more complex and threatening than I'd initially understood. Kevin had been my business partner for 2 years, and in that time, we'd developed a relationship based on mutual respect, shared creative vision, and absolute transparency about business operations and strategic decision-making. We'd never had secrets from each other about client relationships, financial performance, or long-term planning for Pixel Perfect's future. So, when Kevin avoided eye contact and seemed reluctant to engage in our usual morning conversation about the day's priorities and upcoming client meetings, I knew immediately that something significant had happened that he was struggling to discuss. After 15 minutes of awkward small talk and obvious avoidance of serious topics, Kevin finally asked me to sit down for a conversation that he described as difficult but necessary. His tone and body language suggested that whatever he needed to tell me would fundamentally change my understanding of recent events and family pressures. Kevin explained that Danny had contacted him the previous evening, shortly after our family dinner had concluded. The call had lasted over an hour, and it had revealed information about my family's expectations and planning that went far beyond what they'd shared with me during our conversation at Moonshine Patio Bar. According to Kevin's account of the conversation, Danny had presented himself as a future partner in Pixel Perfect, who was already working with our parents and their financial advisors to develop transition plans that would integrate him into the business operations and ownership structure. He'd discussed specific timelines for his involvement, detailed knowledge about our client contracts and revenue projections, and assumptions about decision-making authority that suggested he believed partnership arrangements had already been finalized. But the most shocking aspect of Danny's outreach wasn't his presumptuous attitude about joining Pixel Perfect as an equal partner. It was the extent of detailed information he possessed about our business operations, client relationships, and financial performance that I'd never shared with him or anyone else in my family. Danny knew specifics about our profit margins on individual client accounts, understood the terms of our most confidential contracts, and had insights into our operational challenges and competitive positioning that should have been accessible only to Kevin, Jessica, and myself. The level of detailed knowledge suggested systematic information gathering over months rather than casual conversation or publicly available research. Kevin had been disturbed by the conversation, not just because of Danny's entitled attitude about partnership opportunities he hadn't earned, but because of the implications of his detailed business knowledge. How had Danny obtained confidential information about client contracts, financial performance, and strategic planning discussions that were limited to our core team? As Kevin continued describing the phone conversation, I felt a growing sense of betrayal and violation that went beyond family pressure or unreasonable expectations. Someone had been sharing confidential business information with Danny without my knowledge or consent, providing him with intelligence that he was using to plan his integration into Pixel Perfect as if the decision had already been made. But the revelations didn't stop there. Kevin explained that Danny had also referenced conversations with business advisors who were helping the family develop integration strategies and partnership structures that would optimize tax implications and legal protections for all parties involved. According to Danny, these advisors had been researching Pixel Perfect's business model and market position for several months, developing comprehensive plans for expansion and management transition. The scope of planning and professional consultation behind my family's pressure campaign was staggering and deeply disturbing. They weren't just making suggestions about family collaboration or expressing hopes about Danny's career opportunities. They were developing detailed business plans that assumed my eventual cooperation with their expectations about sharing ownership and control of something I'd built entirely through my own efforts. Kevin's discomfort with the situation was obvious and justified. As my business partner, he had legal rights and financial interests that would be directly affected by any ownership changes or partnership restructuring. Danny's assumptions about joining Pixel Perfect as an equal partner would dilute Kevin's ownership stake and decision-making authority without his consent or input. But beyond the legal and financial implications, Kevin was troubled by the ethical dimensions of the family pressure campaign. The systematic information gathering, professional consultation, and detailed planning suggested a level of manipulation and entitlement that was difficult to reconcile with normal family relationships and reasonable expectations about business collaboration. After Kevin finished explaining the phone conversation, we sat in silence for several minutes while I processed the implications of what I'd just learned. The family dinner that had felt like an intervention was actually the culmination of months of planning and preparation designed to pressure me into sharing ownership of my business, regardless of my personal preferences or business judgment. But Kevin's revelations were only the beginning of discoveries that would completely reshape my understanding of recent family interactions and the extent of manipulation behind their seemingly innocent questions and suggestions. Jessica arrived at the office shortly after my conversation with Kevin, and she immediately sensed the tension and stress that was obvious in both our demeanor and the serious tone of our discussion. As our legal counsel and my closest friend Jessica was protective of both Pixel Perfect's business interests and my personal well-being in ways that made her particularly sensitive to threats that combined professional and family complications. When we explained the situation, Jessica's reaction was immediate and visceral. She'd seen similar patterns in her legal practice, where family members attempted to claim ownership or control of businesses they hadn't helped build based on assumptions about family loyalty and shared success. But Jessica's concerns went beyond general patterns of family business disputes. She was worried about the specific legal and financial vulnerabilities that could result from the systematic information gathering and professional planning that Danny had revealed during his conversation with Kevin. If my family had been working with business advisors and legal consultants to develop integration strategies, they might also be researching ways to pressure or compel my cooperation through legal challenges, financial leverage, or other forms of coercion that could threaten Pixel Perfect's operations and my personal financial security. Jessica immediately began researching legal precedents for family business disputes, focusing on cases where relatives had attempted to claim ownership stakes in companies they hadn't helped establish or build. She also started reviewing our corporate structure, partnership agreements, and intellectual property protections to identify potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited by hostile family members with professional legal advice. But the most important discovery came when Jessica contacted Mrs. Eleanor Foster to schedule a meeting about routine business planning that would allow her to gather information about the extent of my family's research and preparation without revealing our knowledge of their coordination and strategic development. Mrs. Foster's response to Jessica's inquiry was both revealing and deeply troubling. She explained that she'd been working with my parents for several months on family business transition planning that involved comprehensive analysis of Pixel Perfect's financial performance, market position, and legal structure. According to Mrs. Foster, my parents had presented this research as preliminary preparation for eventual family discussions about business collaboration, but the scope and detail of the analysis suggested planning for specific outcomes rather than exploratory research about potential opportunities. The documents Mrs. Foster had prepared included detailed valuations of Pixel Perfect's assets and intellectual property, analysis of our client contracts and revenue projections, and recommendations for partnership structures that would optimize tax implications and legal protections for family members joining the business. But the most shocking revelation was that Mrs. Foster had been working under the assumption that I was already aware of and supportive of these planning efforts. My parents had presented the research as collaborative preparation for family discussions that I had supposedly requested or endorsed. Mrs. Foster had been operating under the belief that I'd asked for professional analysis to support family business integration, and she was surprised to learn from Jessica that I had no knowledge of the extensive research and planning that had been conducted without my involvement or consent. The scope of deception was staggering. My parents had been conducting sophisticated business research and strategic planning for months while maintaining the pretense of casual family conversations and innocent questions about Pixel Perfect's operations. Every detail they'd gathered through seemingly innocent inquiries had been documented and analyzed by professional advisors who were developing integration plans without my knowledge or participation. The betrayal went far beyond unreasonable expectations or family pressure. They had been systematically gathering confidential information about my business, developing detailed plans for restructuring ownership and control, and presenting this planning to professional advisors as if I were a willing participant in strategies designed to transfer wealth and authority to family members who hadn't contributed to Pixel Perfect's creation or success. As Jessica continued investigating the extent of my family's research and planning, she discovered that their business advisors had also been researching legal strategies for compelling my cooperation if I proved resistant to their partnership proposals. They'd been exploring options for family business mediation, legal challenges to corporate structures, and financial pressure tactics that could be used to force compliance with their expectations. The revelation that my own family had been researching ways to legally coerce my cooperation if emotional manipulation proved insufficient was devastating in ways that went far beyond business concerns or financial implications. They'd been planning to use professional legal advice and financial leverage to force me to surrender control of something I'd built through years of sacrifice and determination. The business I'd created from nothing was being systematically analyzed and strategically targeted by people who claimed to love and support me, but who were clearly more interested in controlling the results of my success than respecting my autonomy or acknowledging my accomplishments. The documentation that Jessica gathered from Mrs. Foster painted a picture of coordination and manipulation that completely reframed every recent family interaction and revealed the true extent of planning behind their seemingly reasonable suggestions about family collaboration and business development opportunities. I finally understood that the gradual increase in family pressure, the sophisticated questions about business operations, and the formal presentation of partnership proposals weren't separate developments that had coincidentally aligned. They were coordinated elements of a comprehensive strategy designed to pressure me into sharing ownership of my business, regardless of my personal preferences or professional judgment. The people who were supposed to support my achievements and respect my independence had been secretly working to undermine both, and they'd been doing so with professional guidance and legal consultation that suggested a level of determination and resource investment that was both shocking and deeply hurtful. The foundation of trust that had supported my relationship with my family for 29 years had been shattered by the discovery that they were capable of systematic deception and strategic manipulation when my success threatened their assumptions about family hierarchies and traditional gender roles. The weekend following these revelations was the longest and most emotionally devastating period of my adult life. Jessica had advised me to take time away from the office to process what we'd discovered and develop a strategic response plan. But the thought of spending 48 hours alone with my thoughts about family betrayal and systematic manipulation felt almost unbearable. I drove out to Zilker Park early Saturday morning, hoping that the familiar comfort of Austin's outdoor spaces and the distraction of weekend activities would provide some relief from the anxiety and hurt that had been building since Kevin's conversation with Danny. But even surrounded by families enjoying picnics, couples walking their dogs, and friends playing volleyball, I felt isolated and disconnected from the normal rhythms of life that had once provided comfort and perspective. the betrayal wasn't just about business decisions or financial disagreements. It was about the fundamental realization that the people who had raised me, who claimed to love and support me unconditionally, had been systematically deceiving me for months while planning to force me into surrendering control of something I'd built through years of sacrifice and determination. Every conversation with my parents over the past 6 months now felt tainted by the knowledge that their seemingly innocent questions had been part of a coordinated information gathering campaign designed to support professional analysis and strategic planning that I'd never consented to or even known about. The casual inquiries about client relationships, revenue figures, and operational challenges hadn't been expressions of parental pride or natural curiosity. They'd been intelligence gathering that was being documented and analyzed by business advisors who were developing detailed plans for integrating Danny into Pixel Perfect's ownership structure, regardless of my preferences or Kevin's legal rights as my business partner. But the emotional devastation went beyond the immediate business implications. The discovery that my family had been researching legal strategies for compelling my cooperation, if emotional manipulation proved insufficient, revealed a level of entitlement and disrespect that completely contradicted everything I'd believed about our relationships and shared values. They'd been prepared to use professional legal advice and financial pressure to force me into compliance with their expectations about family loyalty and shared success. The people who were supposed to protect and support me had been planning to coerce me into decisions that would fundamentally compromise my financial security and professional autonomy. I spent most of Saturday afternoon sitting by Lady Bird Lake, watching kayakers and paddleboarders enjoy the beautiful Austin weather, while I tried to process emotions that ranged from anger and betrayal to profound sadness about the loss of family relationships that had been central to my identity and sense of security. The hardest part wasn't the business threat or even the financial implications of their demands. It was the realization that my achievements and success had been viewed by my own family as resources to be redistributed rather than accomplishments to be celebrated and respected. They'd never seen Pixel Perfect as evidence of my capabilities, creativity, and determination. They'd seen it as family wealth that should be shared according to traditional hierarchies and gender expectations that valued male achievement over female independence. My phone buzzed constantly throughout the weekend with calls and text messages from my parents and Danny, all of whom seemed increasingly concerned about my failure to respond to their outreach following the family dinner. The messages started with casual check-ins about weekend plans and gradually escalated to more direct questions about my thoughts regarding their partnership proposal. By Sunday afternoon, my mother was leaving voicemails expressing worry about my unusual silence and asking whether everything was okay with my health and personal well-being. My father sent text messages about scheduling follow-up meetings to continue our business discussions and move forward with implementation planning. Danny's messages were the most difficult to read because they combined expressions of genuine excitement about joining Pixel Perfect with casual assumptions about partnership arrangements that he seemed to believe had already been agreed upon. He was making references to our business and our clients as if ownership transfer had already occurred and he was simply waiting for operational integration to begin. The entitlement and presumption in these messages was staggering, but it also revealed how completely my family had convinced themselves that their expectations about shared success and family collaboration were reasonable and justified, rather than manipulative and inappropriate. Sunday evening brought the breaking point that I'd been dreading but knew was inevitable. My mother called while I was trying to distract myself with meal preparation, and her tone immediately conveyed frustration and concern about my continued silence following what she described as such an important family conversation. She explained that they'd been expecting me to reach out over the weekend to discuss implementation timelines and next steps for bringing Danny into Pixel Perfect's partnership structure. Mrs. Foster was waiting for my input about legal documentation and tax planning strategies, and Danny was eager to begin learning about our operational systems and client relationship management approaches. The casual way she discussed these arrangements as if my consent and cooperation were assumptions rather than decisions that required my voluntary agreement, triggered an emotional response that I'd been suppressing throughout the weekend. For the first time in my adult life, I raised my voice at my mother, explaining that I hadn't agreed to any partnership arrangements, hadn't consented to the business research and planning they'd been conducting without my knowledge, and was deeply hurt by the systematic deception and manipulation they'd been coordinating for months. My mother's response revealed just how fundamentally different our perspectives had become about family loyalty, personal achievement, and reasonable expectations for shared success. She seemed genuinely confused by my anger and resistance, as if my objections to their planning and expectations were evidence of selfishness rather than appropriate protection of my business and personal autonomy. According to her worldview, successful family members had natural obligations to share opportunities and resources with relatives who were struggling with career challenges. My resistance to bringing Danny into Pixel Perfect as an equal partner was disappointing evidence that professional success had made me forget about family loyalty and mutual support. The conversation escalated quickly into the kind of emotional confrontation that our family had always avoided through careful politeness and indirect communication. Years of suppressed tension about gender expectations, traditional family roles, and the value of individual achievement versus collective responsibility erupted into accusations and hurt feelings that neither of us knew how to navigate constructively. My mother accused me of becoming selfish and forgetting the family support that had made my success possible. I responded by pointing out that the support she referenced had actually been years of skepticism, discouragement, and pressure to abandon entrepreneurial risks in favor of stable employment that aligned with their comfort zones rather than my professional goals. The call ended with both of us crying and angry, and with the clear understanding that our relationship had been fundamentally damaged by recent events and underlying conflicts that we'd never directly addressed or resolved. The emotional exhaustion following that conversation was overwhelming, but it also provided clarity about the impossible situation my family had created through their expectations and planning. There was no compromise or middle ground that could satisfy their demands, while protecting my business interests and personal autonomy. They wanted me to share ownership and control of Pixel Perfect with Danny, based solely on family relationships, and their belief that successful siblings should help struggling relatives regardless of merit or contribution. Any resistance to their expectations was interpreted as evidence of selfishness and disloyalty, rather than reasonable business judgment and appropriate boundary setting. The choice was becoming clear, though the implications were devastating from both professional and personal perspectives. I could surrender to their pressure and fundamentally compromise everything I'd built over 4 years of sacrifice and determination. Or I could stand up for my achievements and risk permanent damage to family relationships that had been central to my identity and emotional security. That night, I called Jessica and asked her to begin preparing legal documentation that would protect Pixel Perfect's ownership structure and operational control from any potential challenges or coercion attempts that my family might pursue if I continued to resist their partnership expectations. I also asked Kevin to schedule a meeting for Monday morning, where we could discuss contingency planning for scenarios where family pressure might escalate into more serious threats to our business operations or client relationships. The weekend had been emotionally devastating, but it had also provided essential clarity about the fundamental incompatibility between my family's expectations and my commitment to protecting something I'd built through years of hard work and personal sacrifice. The decision to prioritize my business and personal autonomy over family harmony was one of the most difficult choices I'd ever faced, but the alternative would require surrendering not just financial assets, but my sense of self-worth and professional integrity. The little girl who had once dreamed of making her parents proud through business success was about to disappoint them in ways that might permanently damage our relationships. But the adult woman who had built Pixel Perfect from nothing was finally ready to defend her achievements against anyone who tried to diminish or control them, regardless of family connections or emotional manipulation. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that sometimes follows emotional devastation when shock and hurt transform into focused determination and strategic thinking. I woke up earlier than usual, not from anxiety or sleeplessness, but from a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt since the early days of building Pixel Perfect, when every decision carried existential weight for the business's survival and success. The weekend's emotional processing had burned away the confusion and self-doubt that family pressure had been creating for months. I finally understood that my parents and Danny weren't just making unreasonable requests or expressing misguided expectations about family loyalty. They were systematically attempting to force me into surrendering control of something I'd built entirely through my own efforts, and they were prepared to use professional legal advice and financial coercion to compel my compliance if emotional. Manipulation proved insufficient. The business meeting with Kevin and Jessica that morning felt different from our usual strategy sessions. Instead of discussing client campaigns or operational improvements, we were developing defensive plans to protect Pixel Perfect from hostile family members who had been researching ways to claim ownership stakes they hadn't earned through legal challenges or pressure tactics. Jessica arrived with a comprehensive legal analysis that she'd prepared over the weekend, documenting our corporate structure's strengths and potential vulnerabilities while researching precedents for family business disputes that involved attempted ownership claims by non-contributing relatives. The good news was that Pixel Perfect's legal foundation was solid. Our incorporation documents clearly established ownership percentages and decision-making authority. Our partnership agreement with Kevin included protections against unilateral ownership transfers, and our intellectual property registrations provided legal safeguards around the proprietary marketing strategies and creative approaches that differentiated us from competitors. But Jessica had also identified potential pressure points that sophisticated legal advisors might attempt to exploit if my family escalated their campaign beyond emotional manipulation and family pressure. Business relationships with shared clients, vendor contracts that included family connections, and operational dependencies that could be disrupted through coordinated interference. More concerning was the possibility that my family might attempt to damage Pixel Perfect's reputation within Austin's business community through strategic disclosure of confidential information they'd gathered about our operations, client relationships, and competitive positioning. The detailed business intelligence they'd collected through months of systematic inquiry could be weaponized to create professional difficulties that might pressure me into compliance with their partnership demands. Kevin's concerns focused on operational continuity and client relationship protection during what could become an extended period of family conflict and potential external pressure. Our client base included several high-profile Austin businesses that valued discretion and professional stability, and any public family dispute that involved business operations could jeopardize relationships that had taken years to develop and maintain. We needed contingency plans for scenarios where family pressure might escalate into attempts to contact our clients directly, disrupt our vendor relationships, or create public relations challenges that could damage Pixel Perfect's reputation within Austin's interconnected business community. But beyond defensive planning, we also needed to develop proactive strategies that would demonstrate our business strength and market position in ways that would discourage legal challenges or coercion attempts by making clear that Pixel Perfect's success wasn't dependent on family harmony or vulnerable to external pressure. The strategic planning session that morning lasted nearly 4 hours and covered scenarios ranging from family reconciliation through negotiated boundaries to complete relationship severance and potential legal conflicts. We developed response plans for different escalation levels while identifying resources and relationships that could provide support if the situation deteriorated beyond family pressure into more serious business threats. Jessica's legal research had identified several key vulnerabilities that needed immediate attention. Our business insurance policies required updates to include coverage for family business disputes and potential litigation costs. Our client contracts needed strengthening around confidentiality and relationship protection clauses. Our intellectual Property documentation required enhancement to protect against potential challenges to our proprietary marketing methodologies. But the most important strategic decision involved building external support networks that could provide both professional credibility and practical assistance if family pressure escalated into attempts to damage our business operations or market reputation. Kevin suggested reaching out to Amanda Thompson, a successful entrepreneur who'd been my mentor during Pixel Perfect's early development and who had experience navigating family business conflicts in her own company's growth trajectory. Amanda had built and sold 2 companies while managing complex family dynamics and investor relationships, and her perspective could provide valuable guidance about balancing personal relationships with business protection strategies. I also needed to strengthen relationships with key clients and industry contacts who could provide testimonials about Pixel Perfect's value and professional competence if family members attempted to create doubt about our capabilities or stability. The Austin business community was small and interconnected, and positive relationships with respected industry leaders could provide protection against reputation damage or strategic interference. But perhaps most importantly, I needed to develop financial independence that would eliminate any potential leverage my family might attempt to create through economic pressure or assistance offers. The business was generating sufficient revenue to support both personal financial security and operational growth, but I needed to ensure that family conflicts couldn't create cash flow problems or operational constraints that might pressure me into compromise. Over the following week, we implemented a comprehensive strategy that addressed both immediate vulnerabilities and long-term protection against escalating family pressure. Jessica worked with our banking relationships to establish credit facilities that would provide operational flexibility if family conflicts created unexpected financial challenges. Kevin began documenting our operational systems and client relationship management approaches in ways that would demonstrate business continuity and professional competence to external observers, while protecting against potential disruption if family members attempted to interfere with our vendor relationships or service delivery capabilities. I started reaching out to industry contacts and professional associations to strengthen our market reputation and build relationships that could provide support if family pressure evolved into attempts to damage our business standing within Austin's creative and technology communities. The most difficult aspect of this preparation involved acknowledging that protecting my business might require permanent damage to family relationships that had been central to my identity and emotional security since childhood. The strategic planning process forced me to confront the possibility that choosing professional autonomy and business protection might mean losing the support and connection of people who had raised me and shaped my understanding of loyalty and responsibility. But the alternative was surrendering control of something I'd built through years of sacrifice and determination to family members who viewed my success as a resource to be redistributed rather than an achievement to be respected and protected. The preparation process also revealed strengths and resources that I hadn't fully appreciated during the months of family pressure and emotional manipulation. Pixel Perfect had developed genuine market value and professional reputation that existed independently of family approval or support. Our client relationships were based on demonstrated competence and creative innovation rather than family connections or external validation. Kevin and Jessica's loyalty and support during this crisis proved that I'd built professional relationships based on mutual respect and shared values, rather than obligation or convenience. The business partnerships and friendships that had developed through Pixel Perfect's growth provided emotional and practical support that could sustain me through family conflicts that might have seemed overwhelming just weeks earlier. By the end of that week, we had developed comprehensive plans for protecting Pixel Perfect against escalating family pressure, while maintaining operational excellence and client service standards that had built our reputation over 4 years of consistent growth and market recognition. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.